You're listening to the Sustainable Angler Podcast. I'm your host, Rick Crawford. In this episode, I interview the venturing angler founder, Tim Harden. And Tim and I had met the first time at Abaco Lodge a couple of years ago, about a year and a half ago, I guess. And I was down there conducting a sustainability assessment and met Tim. We fished for a few days and had a blast catching a ton of bonefish down at Abaco Lodge. And we've been trying to get this podcast scheduled for a while. So excited to finally get this out on the interwebs. And in this episode, we talk about how and why Tim founded the Venturing Angler. Have a pretty in-depth discussion on climate change and some important conservation success stories like a day for Bristol Bay, which we'll get into more. But we also talk about our responsibility as anglers to take action to protect what we love. And believe it or not, aside from some book recommendations, we actually conclude with a chat about the Wu-Tang Clan. So hope you enjoy. This episode of the Sustainable Angler Podcast is brought to you by Olakai. Olakai handcrafts Hawaii-inspired footwear, finding inspiration in Hawaiian culture and craftsmanship. Fishing is at the heart of Hawaiian culture today, just as it has been for centuries. Generations of fishermen and women expertly cast from rocky shorelines and sandy beaches. They spearfish, throw net, fly fish, and navigate their boats beyond the reef and into the deep blue in search of the next big catch. No matter how they do it, there's an attention to detail and respect for the ocean that guides their passion. At Olakai, they believe in the same attention to detail when crafting the highest quality shoes and sandals built for every type of marine environment. Olakai's water-friendly Noheamoku slip-on shoe features razor siping with non-marking rubber for extra grip on the deck, the dock, or the rocks, and it's designed for easy on-off barefoot wear. When it comes to sandals that perform, Olakai's new Ulele provides the comfort and durability of a sneaker for those long days on the boat or on the shore. Personally, I love that Olakai is a B Corp, meaning they meet the highest social and environmental standards as a company. But on the product performance front, I love the grip on both the Noheamoku and Uleles, which is perfect for boating or pulling a flat looking for tails. Whether you're loading up the boat, shoreline fishing from the rocks, or scoping out the best place to set up on the beach, Olakai takes you further. Shop or find your local retailer at olakai.com. Get things kicked off, and if you wanted to just provide a little intro and we'll go from there.
Sure, yeah. And it's funny when you said that we've been trying to get the schedule. There may have been a little bit of avoidance behavior on my end, which is funny because I have a podcast, but almost everything I do in the industry is about other people. And
right.
So the idea of being the person being interviewed freaked me out a little bit. And so, but over the course of that year, I've been watching what you've been doing. Not that I wasn't familiar before, but I've watched the growth and am excited about what you're doing. And I thought, if this is really about environmental issues, of course, that's what I want to talk about. So I'm excited about that. And that trip at Abaco was great. I mean, thinking about it now is a little sad because the lodge was destroyed with Hurricane Dorian on September 1st. But that trip was great. I'm lucky I'm able to take a lot of trips, and they're almost always places that my wife would never want to go to. They're And so I rarely think about that. And I walked into my room at Abaco Lodge, and instead of thinking like, oh, wow, this is beautiful or, comfortable bed or whatever, it was like, oh no, because it was such a perfect destination, for just a relaxing time, especially with my wife. It sounds like I'm trying to sell the lodge right now. I'm not. But then the fishing was great. And I think we were on the boat together for 3 days, and I was under the weather. And so I don't know if you remember, but I would like lay down while you were fishing, and then you'd catch a bonefish, and I'd like, jump up from like the fetal position and catch a bonefish, and then we go back and forth. And so, it never feels good to feel bad, but I like that happened because it kind of makes for a fond memory.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I definitely remember that. You lay down and basically take a little cat nap, and then I'd be like, fish on. You'd be like, okay, I'm ready.
Yeah. So I'd be like, how's your day fishing? I took like 4 naps and caught like 5 bonefish. So.
That's and so you mentioned so you have been lucky to get to do some traveling with your work. Can you, I'm sure everyone listening to this is familiar with your site, The Venturing Angler, but how did you get started with that? So you've kind of been I feel like a major figure in the industry from the media side and from the venturing angler. Like how did all that get started, and what drove you to work in fly fishing?
Yeah, I mean, I guess it makes sense to start from the beginning. And it doesn't necessarily make me look good, but people grow, I guess. I think I got started in the fly fishing industry in like 99 or 2000. I can't remember the year, but I was in college in Denver at Regis University. And, I was kind of a diehard angler and just got mostly conventional, though, to be honest. I grew up in the DC area and fished like Maryland a lot and West Virginia. And like you do if you move from that area to Colorado, like I got really into fly fishing and started working at a fly shop. I think I was a good angler, not a great one, and was obsessive. So I think I had enough, at least I thought I had enough expertise to work in the shop. So the shop was called the Denver Angler. It's moved, and the owner was this really great guy named Rick Teifer. And I'm only giving him a shout out in case he's open to forgiveness. But we had a great relationship. I sold a lot of things in the shop, loved working there, but like you see, time and time again, it's like the young guy in the industry, like gets his first role and then thinks, too much of himself. And so I felt like, and I think I got to be on a radio show twice in like my first year or so working for this guy. And so I think I thought that, the sky was the limit for my career. And I was already like this, 20-year-old or whatever. I don't know. I actually don't remember what year it was. So maybe I was a little bit older, unfortunately, future industry heavyweight, which was ridiculous. And I wasn't like that good of an employee, to be honest. I knew that I was passionate about it. I wanted to be good. I sold a lot of reels. But a story that I'll never forget is, and I hope I'm not going on too long already. This is
this is great.
This, right as the relationship was imploding, he came to me, like it was the middle of February. Our location wasn't the best. He ended up moving. He said something like, can we have a talk? And I was like, yeah. And he said, a customer came in on Saturday and said that when she came into the shop, there was no one to be found. There was no employee. And then she walked up to the counter and saw you sleeping on the floor. And he's like, is this true? And I think my response was something like, well, it's a possibility.
It is very, very possible.
And that was like the end. I mean,
all right. Well, I thought this might be a good chance to take a quick break and thank Monic Fly Lines for sponsoring this episode of The Sustainable Angler. Monic Fly Lines are handmade in Boulder, Colorado, with PVC-free coatings and advanced core materials not made from vinyl, making them the most environmentally friendly and technologically advanced lines on the market. With lines for cold or warm weather and fresh or salt water, Monic has got you covered no matter the situation. Engineered by anglers for anglers. So you can head over to www.monic.com and enter the discount code TheSustainableAngler10 when checking out to receive a 10% discount on your order. So that's the Sustainable Angler spelled out and then the numbers 10 for a 10% discount.
so like I left this fly shop and I thought, what do I do now? And my biggest concern was not losing pro staff status for a real company. And
yeah.
This is one of the most pathetic things I've ever done. So I guess that's good, but
yeah. Well, hey, look.
The pathetic thing was I went to a fly shop to try to get a job because they were a dealer of that real company. They didn't have an opening. And so I was like, well, let me just help out.
Can I just hang around here? And
yeah. So I was like giving them a little bit. It wasn't for a very long period of time, maybe a couple weeks. I don't know, but it was like, I was giving them a little bit of free work, hoping that they would hire me, but also ensuring that I had industry discounts and I wasn't losing pro staff status, which is so disgraceful. But I think it's, again, getting back to how I introduced the story was, you see it time and time and time again, a sport that's supposed to connect, detach people from their ego and connect them to nature, ends up being something that is used as a tool for self-promotion and ego and stuff like that. So yeah, that was sort of like a low point, and had a mix of other jobs in the industry after that, including some guiding in not too far from Denver. I worked. There were two really cool magazines. This was in 2007. Fly Fishing Trade. We now have Angling Trade, but at the time there was Fly Fishing Trade and Wild on the Fly. Do you remember Wild on the Fly by chance?
I don't. It sounds familiar, but
it's there's always like I don't know. Very few people remember it. The people who remember it are just like, oh man, I remember that magazine. When the magazine came out, it was shaped like National Geographic. It had not a gold border around it like Nat Geo does, but it had a different color for every issue. And it was the first time that fly fishing media really stepped up its game. And it had incredible professional photography that still to this day would be, top level photography. And then it had writing that was, that you still can rarely find. And it was out of Boulder, Colorado. It was a dream of mine to work for the magazine for a long time. And I worked there for about a year, and ultimately decided to go to grad school to bail out of fly fishing. I think was probably going about it all wrong.
Well, hindsight's 2020, but
Yeah. I mean, it's like I probably wanted to be famous or something. I don't know what that is, but I was a kid. But I went off to grad school and wanted nothing to do with fly fishing ever again, which is a bit sad because fishing since I was like a little kid was always a thing. And I had a decent job outside of the industry, and but to be more fuel efficient and have a reliable car, I got a Subaru, which is usually a smart move. It was the worst Subaru ever made.
You got a lemon?
Yeah, it was always in the shop with huge bills, and I was like, "Oh my God, what am I gonna do? This car is gonna kill me financially." So I needed money. With the job that I had, I couldn't get a part-time job, so I was like, well, I know the fly fishing industry, so I created a guide directory to sell ads, and it worked. And I thought, there's directories just like the Yellow Pages used to be are, they're useful, but they're inherently boring. So I created the Venturing Angler to sort of have something that's more, interesting. And then that sort of took a life of its own. And then, obviously I'm back to loving fishing and, got rid of the self-serving part of it. And the Venturing Angler, I can't, it's been around a while, maybe 10 years or so.
Wow.
And it's, I'm still amazed by it. I'm kind of reclusive on my own. I'm a pretty big introvert. And so, I see the stats and I'm always impressed with how many people are visiting the site. Occasionally I meet people who are like, yeah, I listen to your podcast, and I can't believe it. Because you see the stats, but you don't see the people. But it's something that I've loved, especially honestly when pushing environmental issues.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's something too that, for me, personally, that before having met you and fished with you, I used to tune in to the Venturing Angler and to your environmental section just to always get like a snapshot or see what's happening, because there's so much timely and relevant information that's always on your site, which I love, and having spent time fishing with you, which was super interesting, is, we had, I can't remember, you'll have to fill in a little bit of the details, Tim, but don't you teach about climate change at high school?
There's I teach a course called Ecological Justice. So, with the Venturing Angler, and then a lot of the other things I do, it has to be about that. It's certainly the majority of the content on the Venturing Angler is not about environmental issues, but if it's not a platform for that, then I'm probably worse off than I was when I was helping out a fly shop for free to be on a pro staff.
Right.
And so, I teach an ecological justice course. That's the name of the course. 2 sections of it a year in California. And so, it's I've always been interested in justice issues, and in college I was probably more interested in labor and war and peace issues, and after college, I think even into my late 20s, war and peace issues were the ones that got the most my attention. And I've always, because I've been an angler, you always do care about environmental issues, and I always have. But upon studying what's going on, when that happened, it shook me up. And so that now is really my focus.
Yeah. And can you give me like an example of like, so when you say, like, I understand what that means, like environmental justice, but can you give like an example of a topic in one of your courses there?
Yeah. So the course, it's looking at issues as ecological justice, but then as also issues related to human suffering.
Yeah.
And so the way it's introduced is through really for maybe a month or a month and a half looking at frameworks for studying issues. And so that students can take case study approaches to these issues, and really examine each issue through a process of like critical intellectualism. So I just made up that. I don't know what I would call it. I don't like how that sounds already. So it's not, whatever. But after that, we dive into the issues and so that's going to be climate change, deforestation, energy issues, food and water, mining, ocean issues, poverty, and environmental racism, and throughout a course like this, and in high schools, if you take like an AP environmental studies class, I think you're going to most certainly be studying salmon, maybe other issues with salmonids, dams. And so, the connection to fly fishing is pretty strong and close.
Yeah. And that's something that, we talked a lot about on the boat, when we were fishing together, and obviously have similar views, but I think that it's safe to say that, climate change is not probably. I mean, I think it is the single greatest threat to fisheries around the world. When it comes to freshwater fisheries, there's less snowpack, there's more droughts, more wildfires, warmer stream temps. When it comes to the ocean, we're starting to see on the coast, and I was talking to some people in Maryland, which is just crazy, but you're starting to see migratory patterns change significantly of fish, as they're following they're following the right temperature for them. Like they're actually opening a white shrimp fishery in Maryland next year, which is crazy. And like they're catching a bunch of redfish up there, which they used to, occasionally catch. So there's
tarpon.
Yeah.
I've been hearing about people finding tarpon, and it's not that they haven't been there before, but it's things are changing.
Yeah, right. And so yeah, you're seeing it. It's happening now, and so I wanted to just sort of have a sort of open conversation and just get your thoughts on some of the ways that climate change, we mentioned a few there, but it is impacting our fisheries, and just kind of a open-ended question there of what are your thoughts there?
Yeah, I mean, and first, related to that, but before digging in further, I said things like I used to care about other issues more. It's not that I care about them less. It's not like I'm like apathetic now towards war and peace or labor issues, but I've realized that every major issue, from migration to violent conflict, now is being fueled more than ever by climate change.
Right.
And as I'm sure you've experienced, when you're communicating about this, a response you get is like chill out. It's not that bad. Someone said to me recently, someone I was getting ready to teach a class, and someone said, "What are you teaching about today?" And I said, something like the climate catastrophe of something. And he's like, "Well, not in my lifetime."
Oh no.
Maybe. Yeah. I mean, if you're in Bangladesh, coastal Bangladesh or Indonesia or, drought plagued areas of Africa, it is apocalyptic, catastrophic, you name the ways, the words to describe it that are as extreme as you get. And that is what it is. And so,
and that's happening today.
Yeah, that is happening today. It's happening right now. You have people losing water, property. There's all sorts of migration. I mean, there are scholars who believe that lacking harvest led to the Arab Spring. As always with a lot of these issues, they're complex, and so there's probably a web of things fueling, these big events. But access to food, economic opportunities, water, they're a factor. And so, things are bad. Like I don't know if the California drought affected, avocado prices. I'm lucky enough to be able to not have to pay attention. But, the house I'm calling from right now, could be underwater with a minimal amount of sea level rising and some big tides. And so, it is right now. And I think there's one of the places you'd see that the most is with salmonids. Trout, salmon, and steelhead are so vulnerable to water temperatures. And I worked in a fly shop in San Jose, and for the record, did a good job.
I just want to make that clear. Did a stellar job there.
Yeah. Things went well. I still have those relationships intact. I was older, but I'll never forget, because I spent most of my time in DC, Maryland, and Colorado. I'd hear people in the fly shop say, like, yeah, you used to be able to just walk right over to whatever creek and walk across the backs of salmon. I'd be like, oh, when was that? And it wasn't long ago. It was maybe the 60s. And so in a short amount of time, what we've already done is jarring.
Right.
And the, I'm in California, so you see very clearly what has, we used to have salmon steelhead running all the way down in Southern California. Now I kind of sometimes, depending on where I'm fishing, have mixed feelings about fishing for them at all. I was fishing at Steelhead River. Actually, I haven't been steelhead. I went steelheading New Year's Eve and New Year's Day last year, but prior to that, I hadn't been in a couple of years because the trip prior, I didn't make it to my destination the night that I left to go fish because of fires. I was just driving through basically the ash of people's, lives. I didn't make it, so I had to stay in some motel somewhere. And then the next day I got up to where I was going to fish, and that place had been wrecked by fires too. And so I was in all sorts of traffic where they were trying to repair things. And then, it was seeing an insufficient amount of water, degraded habitat. And then the next morning I saw a dead baby bear on the side of the road. And I was just like, so done that I got out of there. And I think it left such a bitter taste in my mouth. I haven't been back for a while, but in a lot of places. So we don't have the trout, salmon, and steel. Or trout obviously are doing better, but we don't have the fishing that we used to have. I don't know anyone who fishes the Russian River, but that's sort of the epicenter for where it all began in the state. And now I've got questions about if we should even be fishing for some of the other species, but the fish are gone. The California state flag has a grizzly bear on it. We don't have those either. The range, it's dark outside here, but if I looked out the window, I'd be able to see a little bit of I think I would. I'm close to the Santa Cruz Mountains. They used to have one of the biggest populations of grizzly bears. And again, this is not that long. Yeah, it's not that long ago. And so, so what's the impact going to be? I mean, we see it all the time in Colorado. We were always concerned about the health of trout. We had, I was there during drought years when it was questionable about whether you should even fish for them in areas of the South Platte and other rivers too. And then, bring in temperature increases, and they're toast.
And when you mentioned the whether you should even fish for them, just to clarify, you're talking about because of warmer stream temperatures, which is going to stress the fish.
Well, there's that, yeah, and we often do a pretty good job with that. Sometimes we don't, but also just with populations. Yeah. And so, if I'm going to one of the rivers in California where it might take days or a week to catch a fish, should I be catching that fish as it's in the system to spawn? I don't know, probably not.
Well, sorry, go ahead.
No, I think we're entering some scary times with salmonids, and there's good things happening too. The Klamath River dams, there's 4 of them that are coming down in 2021, I think. That's a big deal. But I'm, and anytime I speak about environmental issues, people say like, oh no, I went fishing the other day and it was great. What are you talking about? But I wouldn't be surprised if most of us who fish cold waters are making decisions about when to fish and not to fish based on conditions that that previous generations didn't really have to take under consideration.
Oh yeah. I mean, it's middle of the day in August, probably going to make the decision to fish in the morning or the evening, I mean, it's just kind of.
Yeah. And it's, I'm not, you told me I need to be hopeful, but I'm not optimistic. I mean, I do see things happening, that are good and that I get excited about. But at the same time, I mean, you would see these trout in Colorado that were clearly, they were overfished, but they didn't have healthy water. The whole, I don't want to name places, so that's why I'm kind of hesitating a little bit. You would look around
a river in the Western United States.
Yeah. Well, yeah. I don't want to name like, yeah, I gotta be careful, but you'd see like X River and look around and you could see clearly you could see all the fish because the water was so low coming out of a dam, but you could also see the fish were like mangled, diseased, overcaught. They had no habitat, they had no cover. And then anglers would be coming together to support said river, which is great, by helping maintain trails. Or
right.
I'm not saying that doesn't have value.
Yeah.
But I mean, if I were to really look at that issue, Denver Water, I don't want to name Denver Water at the company itself, but what people do with water in the Front Range is insane. And so that's probably root cause number 1. And so what I've always wanted to see is people up in arms talking about Denver water usage or Front Range water usage. Instead, the people who care the most might be building trails or having like a, film event with beers. But, and those things are good, but I get concerned when I don't see a response to a crisis that even shows the response is lacking.
Yeah. Well, and I mean, and that's, you bring that up, and that's sort of what I think that that you and I are both trying to accomplish through for one, having this conversation, right? But also through the Venturing Angler on your site and your podcast, you're bringing these issues to light. And I think that that's sort of what is, how I think for me, it was like, how can I make an impact? Like, what is going to be a way for me to basically be able to sleep a little bit better at night, knowing that I'm trying to be part of the solution. And I think we're both doing that through in our own ways through our websites, and you're obviously teaching kids about climate justice, but also bringing awareness and raising awareness through your site and podcast. So I think I mentioned this quote the other day, but have you ever read Paul Hawken, any of his books?
I've got Drawdown sitting right next to me.
Yeah.
But I haven't read it. Well, but it's sitting right next to me because it's coming.
Yeah. So I've got Drawdown too. For anyone who's looking for a good read, Project Drawdown is really good. It's 100 solutions to solve global warming. Some of the solutions are are surprising. Just stuff that you might not think of off the top of your head. I think everyone immediately just goes to renewable energy, and just as there are, you mentioned something earlier about like Arab Spring, and I'm sure that's a complex problem. Well, it's the same thing with global warming, right? There's a lot of different solutions. It's complex. There's not one silver bullet that solves it all. It takes a lot of different things happening. But Paul Hawken has also written some other books. The Ecology of Commerce is one, which is really good. Anyway, he's just really inspiring. I've been picking up some of his books that I haven't read in a while lately and sort of thumbing through them, and found this quote that I happen to have handy. But basically it just says, when asked if I'm pessimistic or optimistic about the future, my answer is always the same. If you look at the science about what's happening on Earth and aren't pessimistic, you don't understand data. But if you meet the people who are working to restore the Earth and lives of the poor and aren't optimistic, you haven't got a pulse.
That's good.
And that just really resonated with me, because it gave, when we live in this world where we're, for me, I'm always, reading reports and staying current on the latest and looking at, it's just really easy to feel like you're getting clubbed over the head and having a sense of hopelessness. But when it's framed like that, it's like, yeah, that is right. I mean, if we look at the data, if you're able to look at that, look at the amount of wildlife that's going extinct, looking at population issues, we're growing worldwide population, causing massive deforestation, just all these things, like it can get pretty depressing. But that said, I think that he's right in that there's a lot of good happening in the world, and like I'll give you one example. I was on your site, and so it's not just climate change that we're talking about. There's also like environmental conservation issues that are all related, but like Pebble Mine, for example, which is a big deal. And then so I'm perusing your website like I always do, seeing what's happening out there, making sure I'm staying current, and I see that where was it? Was it like $100,000 were raised for
the Bristol Bay Defense Fund, through the American Fly Fishing Trade Association had an event, I think it was August 24th, called A Day for Bristol Bay. And so anglers came together and contributed items to auction on and stuff like that. And it raised $100,000, which is incredible.
Right. I mean, that's unreal.
Yeah.
And like, here's another thing. This is super cool. I'm just going to mention this if you don't mind.
It's your podcast.
No, well, I mean, I just like, when I look at this stuff, I'm looking for, I'm looking for the positive spin on some of this stuff. And so just a couple quick things. Like, I would encourage anyone listening to this to check out the venturingangler.com and check out their environmental section. So for example, Turniff Flats Resort in Belize, they just added solar panels to meet 80% of their energy needs. That's awesome, right? That fights climate change, saves them money. Rep Your Water, they're now introducing some products that are ethically sourced and made from organic cotton products. So I think that, Indie Fly, they've got a lot going on. They've introduced a new monthly giving program, helps them create, more sustainable communities around some of these fly fishing lodges. So there's tons of like just shitty things happening as it relates to the environment, but just as many of those things are happening, I think there's just as many good things happening.
Yeah, I like that quote that you gave. And it's true. If you're not looking at the data, if you're looking at the data, you should be deeply concerned. And there is real horrible suffering happening right now. And if you're not seeing what people are doing, and not hopeful, there should be concern there. And so with that in mind, I'll be a little bit hopeful real quick.
Let's hear it. I want to hear Tim Harden hopeful exclusively on the Sustainable Angler.
Yeah, but that's just to throw a bone before I get dark again. And I told you this earlier before we were recording, but I was giving a talk a couple of years ago, and when I was introduced, someone said something like, now Tim Harden's going to give a more hopeful message. And I looked over and I was like, I didn't agree to that. And, and I was like, it's not going to happen. And because I do think, I think we tend to do this. Human beings naturally want to be in a safe place. That's what all animals do. We try to move towards safety. And that's why we love movies where the movie ends and everybody's safe and happy again. But we're not moving in that direction. Yeah. And so I do, actually it was helpful to me to have you reading those things from the Venturing Angler, because it's true. There is all that good work happening. At the same time, one of the things that discourages me the most is the fly fishing industry. When I see people in like the San Francisco Bay Area being like wasteful with electricity and consumption, stuff like that, I'm like, great, awesome. Maybe the most aware community of people when it comes to environmental issues is engaging in behavior like this, we're doomed. Mm-hmm. And I kind of feel that way a little bit about the fly fishing industry. And I could go on and on and on and on about the achievements, like the Klamath issue. I don't do ambassadorships, but if it's an environmental organization, I'm all in. And so California Trout's one that I'm excited to be a part of. And they do really awesome things on the West Coast. And so, I cannot wait to see those dams come down. And you're right. A lot of companies now are doing cool things. An environmental activist is the Time Magazine Person of the Year this week.
Yep. Greta Thunberg.
Yeah, that's huge. And, as someone who's always been interested in politics, never, ever, ever hearing about environmental issues ever. And this was in 2016. I was outraged that the debates, when held by progressives, weren't bringing up environmental issues, or it was mentioned as like an afterthought, like, oh yeah, and world peace.
And this too.
Yeah, right. But now it is a central issue, and it has to be. It would be absurd if it wasn't. And so, those good things are happening, but at the same time, like, I think we have a lot of work to do in the fly fishing world. And so, one of the things I teach is that, and I think, I've pulled, these aren't my ideas. I've pulled these from other sources, but I think they're now widely used, is that there are 4 perspectives on the environment. You can be a developmentalist, and the president is literally the developmentalist. And I think that term doesn't need a whole lot of explanation, but your view of the environment is to develop it. Mm-hmm. There's the so that's one extreme. The other extreme is the critical ecological justice. And so that's where you think like there has to be, and there can be a whole wide range of things in this category. I would say that sometimes I fit in this category, sometimes I don't, where there needs to be, just this dramatic drawdown of behavior. One step up from that is preservationists who seek to protect the environment because it ought to be protected. So, for example, I've never been to the Arctic National Wildlife Refuge. I've looked at it enough from a distance to know that it should be protected because it's special for its own sake. And conservationism is one step closer to being developmentalist. I am a conservationist. Last week or the week before, I became a lifetime member of the Backcountry Hunters and Anglers Association. I try to support conservation as much as I can. The one negative thing about conservationism, and by the way, again, I'm all about conservation, but the one thing about it is, unlike a preservationist who wants to seek to protect the environment for its own sake, conservationism is wanting to do much of the same thing, protecting wild places, but for our own use. Right. And so I think we often do a great job at conservationism. Like this Bristol Bay effort is so important, but we don't do a great job often. And what we're not doing a great job often at is protecting things so that we can use them. Mm-hmm. And so I think there's some shortcomings there. And I see so much like social media activism that, and again, like the $100,000 for Bristol Bay wouldn't happen without social media activism. What Backcountry Hunters and Anglers and Cal Trout and Indie Fly and others are able to do with social media probably does more for the environment and conservation than we could have ever dreamed of. But if we're an industry where it becomes a trend, it's, a hashtag and little else, then the first thing that comes to my mind is the quote from Edward Abbey that's used in Damnation. Sentiment without action is the ruin of the soul. Like, it's almost as if we're worse. It's like sentiment and like pretend action. Yeah. And so I get hopeful, I get excited. And I guess that's the way it is with every justice issue or any type of moral issue or anything. You have moments of excitement, enthusiasm, and despair at the same time. Like, I think it's exciting to see all these companies stepping up. But as an outdoors company, as you said earlier, you need to be able to sleep at night. Well, you should. But there are a lot of companies, some of them being the most profitable companies in the outdoors industry, who do as close to nothing as possible. And sadly, we're not really even using the term climate change yet. Like you see some companies like Patagonia and a couple of others even saying climate change. Meanwhile, like Shell and Exxon they're using the term climate change for like, with ulterior motives, probably. I don't trust their climate change advocacy at all.
No.
However, at least they say it.
Well,
and so
yeah, I mean, that's part of it, right? It's just, there's enough of a, so anyway, 100% agree with with that. And by the way, I also like those 4 different, that's really interesting. The preservationist, conservationist, developmentalist, and what was the other extreme?
Yeah, I mean, I'm using one book that uses critical ecological justice. I'm sure it's renamed in other ways by others.
But whatever. I mean, it's still an interesting way to categorize the different mindsets, because you're totally right. I mean, I feel like I maybe have a foot in the conservationist camp and the other in the preservationist camp, I think.
For me, I would say that I am probably more of a preservationist than anything, but I probably see more hope in conservationism than anything.
Yeah.
Because unfortunately, it's the conservationists that are making they're making the moral case for protecting areas, but they're also making the economic case. And that's going to sell at the end of the day.
That's exactly right. That's how that they're able to get things accomplished is, hey, look, there's a real economic impact to the fishing industry in this area. And, those are the things that, hey, this creates jobs. Like, those are the things that to drive and change policy are necessary, other than we should keep some places sacred for the sake of them being left alone. That doesn't sell in a lot of arenas.
Are you familiar with Kohlberg's theory of moral development?
No.
So Lawrence Kohlberg was a psychologist at the University of Chicago and Harvard a while ago. And, like any type of philosophy like this, there's, plenty of room for criticism, but he believes that people develop morally in stages. And so, like a child obeys rules to avoid negative consequences, and they're rules set by others. You know what I mean? A step up from that is like, hey, if I do this for somebody, I might get something back. And it goes up towards this progression that way. And ultimately, the 6th stage is this like selflessness, where you're not getting anything in return or receiving any type of like, any type of benefit whatsoever for trying to do good.
Mm-hmm.
In fact, you might actually suffer as a result of your interest in doing good. We're not there.
Right.
You see it happens. But we're definitely earlier in the stages of moral development. And I'm not saying that we're immoral or people are immoral. I'm not, anytime you talk about environmental issues, you're going to get a bunch of comments, people saying that you're self-righteous or whatever. But
which is so, that's a whole nother conversation. That's so bizarre. But anyway,
but the point I'm trying to make is like, I have concerns, and I'm really tuned into social media. And so I think that's definitely a factor. Mm-hmm. Where you see so much behavior. And I think this is why I mentioned how I was early in my career in the fly fishing world. You see so much behavior that is just so self-serving that it's just this ultimate failure. And seeing like pretend activism from people whose quote unquote fame and fortune, if you will, is from the outdoors. It's, I don't know what word I was going to say next, but it's not a good one. And so, right. I want to emphasize again, I am very, 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 very pro conservation. And I just, I became a lifetime member of the Backcountry Hunters and Anglers Association. I'm so excited about what they're doing right now.
Well, let's talk about that. I mean, what drove you to make that decision? And
yeah, I'm glad you asked. They came out of nowhere. I can't remember how old they are, but I remember seeing them at a show and saying like, "Oh wow, that's cool." And the person that I was with responded to me and was like, "Who are those guys? What a joke." Well, they're no joke. In a short amount of time, they've been putting up a good fight for conservation in a way that is way less self-serving than other conservation groups. By the way, I don't mean that came out wrong. I don't think they're self-serving. I think a lot of conservation groups are.
Okay.
I had one major hunting organization came out with a press release praising gutting the Endangered Species Act recently.
Right. Yeah. I mean,
yeah. Another major hunting conservation organization had Jason Chaffetz last year as their keynote speaker at their annual gala or whatever. Jason Chaffetz, for those who don't recall, is he was a Republican senator from Utah, who I think upon the day or close to it, but I think it was the day that the Senate was sworn in, the Republican majority Senate was sworn in with Trump, introduced a public land grab bill. And he becomes the keynote speaker at a conservation organization dinner. And by the way, he was so ridiculed for this that he ended up posting a photograph of himself in camo, like in the woods or something, and taking back the bill. I think he withdrew it. So you have BHA who likes to emphasize that they're apolitical, but they care about certain issues and they go after it. And and they're good. Their communications team is strong. And so when that new guy was appointed, if I could, I think I could remember his name if I tried, but I don't want to. The guy who was appointed to be the head of the Bureau of Land Management, who doesn't believe in public lands.
Right. Yeah. That's nice, isn't it?
Right. Immediately BHA is out, with an action plan. And so I'm finding now that I'm learning about critical issues from them before I hear about it in the news or elsewhere. So, I'm pretty excited about what they're doing. And so, and I'd also, the week before this was Giving Tuesday and they had matching funds. And so that's one of the reasons I thought it'd be a good time to become a lifetime member. But also the week before I was on a mule deer hunt in Montana. Okay. Mostly on public land. And, there's something amazing about that. Like, having this world open up to me that I can explore miles and miles and miles of like, just this amazing country. At the same time, like I'm on X, the app, a lot of the time making sure that I'm not crossing this line or that line. And, having had a difficult season of hunting in California when it comes to, trying to find accessible areas that weren't crowded or whatever, it's an issue that's it's tough to see how hard access can be. It's great to see how rewarding and meaningful and beautiful access can be. I'm going to remember that trip to Montana for the rest of my life. And so I wanted to support a group that was putting up a good fight for that.
Yeah. And
there's something to be hopeful about, like
right.
An organization sort of coming out of nowhere. I don't know how many years ago, and really doing good, meaningful work. Yeah. And there's lots of them like that.
Yeah. And I mean, there's, but Backcountry Hunters and Anglers, I agree with you. I'm a member and supporter because of really for me, it was about giving, when I moved out west and sort of got introduced to fly fishing and sort of fell in love with that. Well, I wouldn't have been able to do that without public lands. And, a sense of, I think, responsibility to ensure that the next generation and generations after are able to, if they choose to have those same experiences, and to do anything to jeopardize that is, I think inherently wrong. But completely agree that backcountry hunters and anglers is definitely a success story, and one that is inspiring positive change. And I mean, that's what this is all about, whether it's climate change, public lands. I mean, all these are sort of interrelated in a way, particularly when you talk about like drilling on public lands and things of that nature. Yeah. But it's interesting.
And at the same time, like, just getting back to how we can fail as an outdoors industry, there was a show on, I think it was on television last week or the week before. I'm not going to name the show or what channel, but the title was something like, I guess I am kind of naming it, but the title was something like Donald Trump Jr. modern day Theodore Roosevelt. And I guess they're both from New York, but why? Because he hunts and fishes? What is he doing that resembles in any way what Theodore Roosevelt did when it comes to public lands and respect for creation and stuff like that? So it gets to the heart of where my concern is. Doing the sport doesn't make you part of the solution. I mean, it does when you pay for like licenses or whatever, but we can't give ourselves too much credit. And certainly I fail all the time. But there was one group that basically was arguing that for a while, where like, if you're involved in said outdoor activity, or I guess unsaid, but whatever, if you're involved in this outdoor activity, you are fighting a good fight, in other words.
Yeah, that's not.
No, you're not.
That's not how it works. That is untrue.
And if we're gonna, talk about participation trophy, that's insane. Yeah. So yeah, again, I guess being involved in issues like this, you see moments of, good and bad, and that's just how it goes with these issues. Yeah, but Field and Stream magazine, they had a big social media post that got a lot of attention a couple of years ago with concern about where trout will be in 2050, and it was not a positive outlook. And like I said earlier, oil companies are talking about the threat of climate change. So I think the angling community really needs to step up their game.
Yeah. I mean, I think if you're not, if you're a climate change denier, you're really, I don't know. I mean, you're not paying attention, and it's everywhere. I mean, Charleston this year, Tim, had over 70 days where we flooded, which is unprecedented. Every year is another record for when downtown floods. So sea level rise is here. It's going to start affecting property values. It's going to cause a lot of problems. It's also, certainly not going to enhance our fishery. So I think that we are as a country and hopefully as an industry, moving more towards accepting the science that's overwhelmingly clear on climate change in particular. And then the next thing is, hey, well, what can I do about it? And I think one of, if not the most powerful thing that an individual can do is to let their elected officials know that that they care about climate change, they're concerned about climate change, and that they'll vote for those in office that are looking for solutions, because it's it's our generation, and it's the generations after they're going to have to deal with the repercussions of the deniers. And so I would encourage anyone, if you're looking for an easy way to do that, you can check out Conservation Hawks. They have a lot of good information. Protect Our Winners, another good organization. But just thought I'd throw that out there just as a hey, well, what can I do right now if you're listening? Well, hey, get on the horn or send an email to your elected officials and just say, I'm concerned. I'm an angler or I'm a hunter, and this is deeply concerning to me.
And on that note, I'm glad you mentioned that. I don't know if you saw it over the summer on Instagram. For the first time, I called out the followers of the Venturing Angler and said, in effect, yo, if we post about like a new rod or something, the traffic is through the roof. The click-through traffic's insane. It's, it's everything you could dream of if you're running a website. If I say, take 30 seconds to sign a petition or, submit a comment to the Fish and Wildlife Service or whatever on an issue, it's almost nothing consistently.
That's interesting.
Yeah. And I think that the experience of that for the last nearly decade or however long it's been on the Venturing Angler of, post the new Sage Trout LL rod and I hope I didn't just mess up the sponsorship of this show, but and then you get all these clicks and then you say like, hey, take action for the most recent issue that I was involved in was the Deschutes River. Yeah. I mean, we had a hard time getting people who live there and some guides to sign a petition that took less than a minute and that wasn't a petition to submit comments about wanting a habitat conservation plan. People wanted it to take the health of the river and the fish and other species under consideration. It was like pulling teeth. And so for those who just listen to Rick's advice about Protect Our Winners and BHA and all these other organizations, when they send you like an action alert or you get one from the Venturing Angler or Rick or whoever else, it takes less than a minute. Please, we need your voice. And for me, sometimes people thank me for taking action. Usually you get criticism, but people thank me for taking action or volunteering time or pushing a post or whatever for somebody. It's weird to be thanked because if you're going to work in the outdoors industry and make money on the outdoors industry, how could you not take action?
Right.
And so, we have to. We just have to.
Well, I think that's right, and I think that I'm glad that got brought up because that is really important, right? If we're not all voicing our opinions, we're going to get looked over, and things are not going to go the way that are beneficial to anglers or hunters for that matter. So I think that's really important point to have made.
And there's the easy stuff, like Bristol Bay has been, that's, oh man, I'm so concerned about that one, seriously. But that's become the easy one where it's fashionable,
right,
to fight for Bristol Bay. And there are some issues like that. We got to do better than that. We got to do better than like the cool ones.
Yeah. Well, yeah.
I know like Scott Heed is gonna, and other people who are fighting the fight on that are gonna be like, oh man, don't call it the cool ones. But we can't be activists because it's trendy to do so, and that happens a lot. And I don't mean to disrespect the people who care deeply about the issue and are doing it, but someone said to me a few years ago, there was a different issue in Alaska that this guy was fighting for, and he said, it's really hard to push this issue forward because Bristol Bay has, for the last however many years, has sucked all of the oxygen out of the room. And I agreed with him for a while, but I was thinking about that quote last night because I knew I was going to talk to you today. Bristol Bay hasn't done that. Bristol Bay is requiring very little of a large group of people. They call on us to make comments, to, sign our names to things, to donate. And we need to give that as much as we can, but we can give a lot more.
Yeah.
And I need to give a lot more. This is the time we have to.
Yeah, I agree. Everyone needs to certainly do their part and do what they feel is right, and whatever that is, you should be fighting for it, because I think I can't remember the entire quote off the top of my head, but it's like Tom McGuane, right? We've reached a point on the life of the planet where every angler needs to be a watchman on the high seas. And if you're not paying attention, it can go away, because there's people who, mining companies and in Pebble Mine's case, and oil and gas in terms of public lands and elsewhere, that will work really hard to make sure that they're making money and are not concerned about the impact to the environment and our fisheries. So,
and if we don't fight now, not just because things are worse, and there are, I grew up on the Potomac River. Potomac River is better, but globally things are worse. Mm-hmm. Climate change is, and just the pollution alone, like pollution's bad. Right. For climate deniers, I'm sometimes like, all right, fine, let's talk about pollution. It's bad. But if we don't, things are bad now. There's the pollution, there are the issues with public lands and water quality and so forth. But the counter argument is always jobs. Someone said that to me. Two comments that I'll probably remember for a long time in response to a post on Bristol Bay was, "Who told you this mine was going to be destructive? A birdie?" That was one. It's literally in the blueprints. I don't know. Is it blueprints for a mine or whatever it is, the plans. And another one is, all I hear is jobs, jobs, jobs. Well, this is the lowest unemployment, I think, in my lifetime. So at what point do we stop compromising everything that is sacred for jobs? Like, right. When someone needs to, if you're going to keep making the jobs argument, you also have to let us know when we can finally start talking about what is actually sacred, rather than short-term jobs for whatever.
Well, yeah, I think there needs to be a deeper understanding of what should be protected for, not for its economic value, basically. As you mentioned, something being sacred, and there needs to be areas that, similar to what we talked about earlier, like the Arctic National Wildlife Refuge. I've never been there. It would be cool to have an opportunity to go there, but we shouldn't have to be fighting our government over keeping some areas, just letting some areas alone and stop trying to develop it. As you said, for the sake of jobs in that case.
To get back to denial, there's 2 points I want to make. One, I'll start with the short one first. I think we also need to think about what denial means. Donald Trump is obviously a climate denier, and it's very clear that he denies the science. when I thought Hillary Clinton was going to be president, because Donald Trump talked about grabbing women, the next class I went to, I think it was the next class that I was teaching, I talked to the students about Hillary Clinton as a climate denier. The idea that how she's responding to the environmental crisis is in its own way denial. And so, I think climate denial is a failure, but I also think there's another failure for those who believe in the science but are dismissive of the reality. And so I think we all need to, all of us, including me, because I think my behavior would change if I confronted the reality more. Mm-hmm. We all need to be honest about what's really happening and take action in response to what's happening. The other thing is again, like, okay, I sit with family members who deny that climate change is real and they're dismissive of these issues. Well, if I were to look at my life in terms of like meaningful moments, much of it is in nature. And so growing up and fishing in Southern Maryland and West Virginia and a little bit in Western Maryland, those areas in many ways are dead. Like what I experienced as an angler doesn't exist there anymore. I moved to Colorado and you see a lot of the same thing. And then in more recent meaningful experiences, like, I went to an area of Argentina that moved me and I think formed me in some ways. And there's a constant threat of mining in that area. Yep. I would say one of the most life-changing experiences I've ever had. And to use the word sacred again, where like I find myself, I find the divine, I find an experience of like wholeness that is very hard to duplicate in the craziness of day-to-day life. In the Tongass National Forest, I was probably changed forever in 2016. And now it looks like we're going to have roads there. If the roadless rule is lifted for the Tongass, there is no more Tongass National Forest as we know it. There just isn't. And for those who, downplay language like that, well, everything I experienced as a child is pretty much gone, or in my early 20s or whatever. So why would I not think that putting roads in a place that is incredibly inaccessible wouldn't change things? So it will. It's a guarantee. And so, I can't remember the original point, but the way we talk about these things, I think we just have to face it with a brutal honesty, and then all of us come together and respond accordingly.
Yep. Well, yeah. And I think that's probably a good takeaway for everyone is, hey, take action, do what you can. And as anglers, I feel like we have a responsibility to do that. And so I do want to shift gears though a little bit from environmental now, Tim. And let's just talk a little fishing, right? Because this is the sustainable angler.
That's right. Good. When you said you were shifting focuses, I'm like, what could we? I thought you were going to bring up the Wu-Tang Clan. But
so this is definitely going to make it. Just so everyone knows, every time when we were in the Bahamas, every time Tim hooked a bonefish, I'm going to let you say it. His immediate response was,
Wu-Tang. And just by coincidence, I woke up early. I wake up early every day, but I just threw on some clothes to be ready for the podcast, and I look down. I'm wearing Wu-Tang Clan hoodie right now. So
speaking of which, I have to say this. There is a Wu-Tang documentary on Amazon Prime.
On Amazon, right, yeah. I haven't watched it yet, but it's I'm like waiting for a special moment. Like I can't just have it on in the background, so I'm gonna watch that soon.
All right, so I'm pulling these literally off the top of my head. So we're talking a little bit about what are some of your favorite fishing related books that maybe you've read recently? Anything good?
Oh man. No, because most of the books that I read, I get very interested in a lot of non-angling outdoors stories.
Okay. All right. Well, let's wrap that into the mix then.
Yeah. So, I'm trying to think of what there's been lately. I'm looking over at the bookshelf and it's mostly magazines, but the angling ones that I do read are like skill development books. And so, I'm actually just to answer your question without being caught too off guard. I'm scrolling through book reviews on the Venturing Angler. Oftentimes, like I'll be getting ready for a trip and just like dive into a book about bone fishing
like if you're about to go bone fishing, you're like, okay, and then read up on it a little bit and try a new technique or basically improve.
Yeah, I mean the books that I keep opening and then reading parts of and closing, Yvon Chouinard's Simple Fly Fishing techniques for Tenkara rod and reel. I've never Tenkara fished before, but I do think what he I was at Las Pampas Lodge in Argentina, and he goes down there a bit, and I was hearing from people who fished with him talk about how he fishes, and he really just strips it all down and is simple about it. And I like that. So I've been reading chunks of that one. And the other one that stands out is I just got Some Stories, Yvon Chouinard's Lessons from the Edge of Business and Sport. I think the way he communicates breaks me out of like, sometimes I'll make conclusions
right
a little prematurely or think I understand things in certain ways. And I think his blunt and harsh way of communicating, sometimes harsh, is good for me because it takes me out of like sometimes traditional ways of thinking, or social norms or preformed, viewpoints formed by social norms, I guess I should say. And so he gets me to sort of break out of that a little bit. I've been trying to get inspired as a writer a little bit more. I want to change I want to change some of the topics I'm writing about. So, I've got Points Unknown, which is a book that came out a long time ago. I don't think it's still in print, from Outside Magazine. That's just a range of stories from like Shackleton expeditions and.
Oh, that's cool.
And there's some Krakauer in there, I think too. But I've been diving into photography more. I guess I would say that if I've been reading anything over the last couple of years, more than anything, it's books on photography. So, which
I bet are just really engaging text.
No, like I'm
kidding. My wife bought now I'm blanking on the camera, but she bought a nicer camera. And so I was trying to use it. So I was like reading the manual and I was just like,
No,
I think I'm just going to have to make a ton of mistakes until I figure it out. I was like, 'cause I don't think I can actually read this.
Every time I read a book on photography, and there have been a lot of them, I'm hoping it's the last. Yeah. And it just keeps going. But it's funny. I've got 3 enormous bookshelves of books, and a lot of it's magazines. I love like climbing and surfing magazines and stuff like that, even though I don't do either sport. When people say every so often, have you read all these books? I've read part of most of them. So like right now I'm looking at Bruce Chatwin's In Patagonia, which is a classic book about Patagonia. I bet you I read a decent amount of that book. But if I were to look at all these books and see what I've completed, the list would be pretty small. I've read a little bit of a lot of books.
That's good. You just like to peck at them a little bit. There's nothing wrong with that.
Yeah, some people are going to take issue with that, but Harden inspired me to be honest.
yeah, that's right. All right. So related to fishing, what is, which I kind of ask everyone this, but it's just always interesting, I think. What is your favorite species to catch on fly? Salt or fresh?
Huh.
Or one of you. I mean, it's so tough. It's kind of like it could mean so many different things, but
I've been tarpon fishing a number of times. I'm by no means, I have no right to say I'm like I have no right to say that I am any sort of tarpon angler because of, I've caught a few. That experience is like transcendent. It's the first time I caught a tarpon. I told the guide that I needed a moment, and I sat on the bow of the boat, like with my head down, and just processed for a while. Something happens. And I said to him before I caught my first tarpon, this is Jason Sullivan. He was like he's the coolest guy. He's so quiet, which is kind of rare among tarpon guys. But he's just like this really nice, kind Everglades guide. So I said to him, I was like, well, how do I know if the tarpon ate? And he said, everything stops. And I think he just meant the fly, but maybe he didn't. Maybe he knew that there was going to be an experience of leaving the world as I knew it.
Right.
And that has happened to me every time that I've hooked up with a tarpon. And that makes a strong case for it being my favorite fish to catch. Those fish and they were big ones. I mean, they weren't the huge ones, but they were 50 or 60 pounds. And so, maybe
might be all the tarpon that you even want.
Yeah.
Honestly.
Right. And I've never caught a baby tarpon, so maybe I'd catch one of those and be like, meh. But when I catch like a, 8-inch trout, those fish are compelling. Like they've got all of my attention. So it'd be between trout and tarpon. I'm at a point in my experience as an angler where if I can hike 10 miles and not 10, 5 and catch one 8-inch trout and be able to admire the beauty of that fish, then I had a great day. And so, you don't get tired of catching trout.
No, you don't. This past summer, I went back out to Wyoming for the first time in 7 or 8 years. And really the first time I had spent, where there was several days where I went trout fishing, and just like, when I moved back to the Southeast, I just got so focused on saltwater that I don't want to say I forgot about trout fishing, but I forgot how much I loved it until I went back out and did it a few. I was like, oh my God. And I was like, this is just this is, you know, this is what I fell in love with to begin with. Like, this is awesome.
Right.
So I can definitely relate there. Another question I have, is, you know, so the venturing angler, right? You've have been fortunate to have fished in a lot of beautiful places. Any places that come to mind that were pretty special for you, in your travels over the years?
Yeah. And by the way, I hope this applies to you too. My belief about a podcast is people can turn it off if they want to. So if I'm just going on and on,
No,
I hope I didn't apply my principle of how to have a good podcast.
Not at all. I mean, this is good.
But two, I mean, the hunt I went on in Montana was with my friend Rick Matney, who, I mean, he's an incredible outdoorsman. He's the one who I went to the Tongass with too.
Okay.
And he's, you know, again, that experience was, we wouldn't be having this conversation without him. Not that I wasn't already doing my thing in the industry, but it changed everything for me, in many ways. But, Argentina, I went to the Rio Pico region of Argentina in Patagonia, a couple of years ago with some friends, some people I work with in the industry, Sean McCormick and Will Phelps and Brian Gregson. And we were getting content and working on several things down there. And we had the guy who runs the show down there is this like really charismatic guy named Augustine Fox, and we call him Augie. And he's in that film Finding Fontanalis, and so it's that area. Yep. And that's the guy, and he's this awesome madman. So one day he's like, hey, we should all go camping tonight. And none of us were interested in going camping. Like, we were pretty happy with where we were staying. Like, we liked the little house we were staying in. We all came together at night and like got on our computers and, you know, emptied out, SD cards and took care of gear or whatever, and had good food. He's like, no, let's go camping. And we're like, no, we don't want to. Let's go camping. And so he kept pushing and we kept saying no. And then we were unpacking camping gear. I think he tricked us. Maybe I missed a step in the conversation. But it's like brutal Patagonia winds. Not brutal, but it was very windy. It was like the air, it was like misty out. So it's like this wet wind, and we set up the camp on the river, and started a fire. And that night we ate meat around the fire, drank wine, Fernet and Coke. It was one of the best nights of my life. I slept 11 hours in that tent.
Holy cow.
Yeah. And then I woke up in the morning, went down to the river, drank the water right out of the river, and just felt this like level of peace and being content. And, you know, we were there on a project. And so, we didn't have to pay because it was work. But I was looking at the people who were there, the other anglers. I'm like, wow, these guys, you know, people only, no matter what you do, for the most part, most people only have so much time off. And with that time off, you're always making a decision to like, you know, a decision to not spend time with family members if you're going fishing, or to, you know, not do other things. You know, you're always deciding what, you know, when you travel to South America to fish, you're making a decision that it's very important. You got to leave family or other priorities. So these guys chose to do that with their time, spent a ton of money, and it's really hard to get there. And we all raved about this night in like the wet wind. And I came to the realization, like, if you were to go back 100 years and tell people, like, yeah, in the future, one of the best nights of my entire life was when I slept outside, ate meat around a fire, and drank out of a river, they'd be like, what? That's normal life. And I think I told this story on another podcast too. It shows us, it was a reminder to me of many, many, many things, including that we are creatures, right?
Yeah.
And when we stop doing our creaturely activities, it hurts us. And when we do them, as simple as they are, one night, sleeping outside, eating meat around a fire and drinking out of a river, it's so restorative that these guys, these like a very accomplished, businessmen or whatever, were also saying it was one of the best nights of their life. And every year they look forward to doing it again.
Yeah.
It reminded me of what my priorities need to be as a creature too.
That's awesome. And yeah, and actually I think, Tim, that's probably a good story to conclude with.
All right.
So I think that's a great way to end the show. As a reminder that, we're part of nature, not separate. So sort of tying this whole conversation together, is, as anglers, I think that we do have a responsibility to protect what we love. And I think part of, or at least for me, part of the angling experience that I do love is the travel component, right? And getting to see new places and meet new people and fish new water. And I think what you just said there was pretty powerful, and just remembering that a night outside with good company and just the simple things that the fly fishing lifestyle can deliver those types of experiences is pretty powerful.
That's right.
So Tim, I want to thank you very much for your time. Everyone listening, if you're not, or you haven't already, make sure you're following what Tim's doing at theventuringangler.com. Anything else you want to throw in there before we
yeah, I mean, that last comment you made is one that I really want to emphasize and put an exclamation mark on. This dualistic attitude towards things is always destructive. If you separate things that aren't supposed to be separated, man and woman, black and white, and you can go on and on, but for this topic, humans and nature, we have a habit of separating ourselves from something that we're not separate from. And so I think we're reminded of how things are supposed to be when we're in nature. And I think as the fight continues, we just need to be mindful of the fact that we are part of nature, all of creation, and us, we all come together. And so we can't separate ourselves from it. And when we do, and when we separate ourselves from those who are suffering from the environmental crisis, that's where injustice comes. And so to make this all work, we gotta see things as they are, not in a different reality in which things are separate.
Yep. Yeah, I agree. And I think that is a very valid point, to remember that we're all in this together and we're all a part of it. And you can't have one versus the other. So I think if we can work together towards common solutions, then we'll be a lot better off. So let's just solve climate change, guys. Let's just, I mean, how hard is it? The solutions already exist.
That's right.
So let's get on that. And while we're doing it, let's wet a line along the way.
Yeah.
All right, Tim. Well, thanks so much. I very much appreciate your time, and I'm glad we finally got got to do this.
Yeah, that was fun. Thank you.
All right, special thanks to our sponsors, Olokai and Monarch Fly Lines, for supporting the Sustainable Angler podcast. The Sustainable Angler is available on iTunes, SoundCloud, Spotify, or wherever you listen to podcasts. We also recently created a YouTube channel, so don't forget to subscribe there. And if you like what you're hearing, it really helps us out a lot if you give us a follow, a like, rating and review, or share on social media, so that we can continue to educate and create more awareness about environmental threats to our fisheries, while also sharing success stories that inspire action. Thanks for tuning in. We'll see you next time.